So officially, welcome to the second teen webinar for this year. The topic is Tzedakah versus charity. We're doing the Mixtape curriculum. And I'm going to share with you, hopefully this is going to work as well. Here we go. Okay, so can everybody see what's on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. And good, and I can hear you. That's great, because I wasn't sure because my computer's acting strange. Okay, so I'm going to start off like I always do, reminding everyone that we should share interesting things that your students do on our Facebook group. And also the mixtape curriculum that we're talking about today has something called Wrapping Rebbes that you can Instagram them. So there's a link on the materials to the Instagram page, and your students can send questions or they can send something they've done in class that they're proud of to us via Instagram, and they'll receive a reply within 48 hours, probably even less. And when talking about the Facebook page, so over the weekend I shared a link that relates to our topic of generosity. It's called The Injustice of Asking Jewish Educators to Do Unpaid Work. It's from the foreword. And Sarah Rudolph, who's the educator who wrote the article, in it she talks about the conflict between idealistic passion and financial needs, which I'm sure speaks to all of us. It also speaks to our topic of tzedakah versus charity. In Musar, we learned that we should aim to have just the right balance in each done, not too much or too little. And so we can talk about this more later in the webinar. Another nice thing on Facebook, last year, one of our educators shared a great link. Ellen, you might remember it. You guys might want to check it out, and you might find it useful in your classes. And if you go on Facebook, you'll see it. It's a powerful tool. It can help teens visualize how generosity plays into their lives. It's, you might have even seen it. It's like a race, and they have all these kids lining up, and then they say, if your parents are married.
Right.
Right? You know that video?
Yeah.
So there's a link to that on Facebook also. It's really interesting. It could be very useful for this theme as well.
They used it in my daughter's graduate program. That was one of the first things.
It's very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. It was very interesting for her, because she was like in a place. She's like, oh my gosh,
Right.
She didn't realize she was privileged.
So privileged that if your parents have never asked you to pay your own phone bill, or I forget what they all are, but they're very interesting, and they really, I think it's something that interesting to watch with your students. So it could be helpful. So I'm going to start with the themes. So we're doing tzedakah versus charity. And this corresponds to the standard October topic, the standard Chai Mitzvah topic, which is tzedakah, and to the Musar topic, generosity. So we're going to do some comparisons between tzedakah, generosity, and charity. See where they overlap and where they're different and how we distinguish between them. Speaking of generosity, a good place to start, the Hebrew word for generosity, nidivut, derives from the root nun daled vet, which has to do with willingness. In contemporary Hebrew, the word for volunteer is mitnadev. It's from the same root. It's good info to keep in the back of our minds as we look at charity and tzedakah and how they're defined here. So charity and tzedakah are often used interchangeably, but they aren't actually the same thing. Though they're used interchangeably, tzedek is from the root justice. It's like given to right a fundamentally unjust situation. According to Jewish tradition, it's an obligation to help others and have their needs met. It doesn't really matter how you feel about it. Charity comes from the Latin root caritas, or heart, and that's more of an impulse. It springs from love and compassion. So when charity becomes enabling or unsupportive of, or supportive of a destructive lifestyle, then it's no longer tzedakah. Tzedakah is a form of giving that's not about bandaging wounds out of love. It's more about an obligation to promote health. And I think that's also very important in our current times with all the challenges that we face. So I actually can't see you guys on the screen. So if you want to say anything or have a comment, please just jump in anytime and just talk, and I'll answer you. Okay, so let's look at the first topic. Every lesson begins with definitions. So here the students look at these definitions and they're asked to decide whether the text is describing tzedakah or charity or both? So I'll read each one and then you tell me what you think. Okay, the first one. It is such that at its height, you strengthen a man's hand until he need no longer be dependent upon others. What do you think? Tzedakah or charity or both? No one is talking. I'm going to ask Ellen what she.
Both.
Oh, yes. Adam. You think
Yeah,
both?
I think that's both.
I think so too. At first I thought just tzedakah, especially because it was Maimonides who said it. But if you think it over, it could also apply to charity. I agree with you. Okay. It's what we give to make things go away.
Charity?
Charity.
I think charity also.
Yeah.
And that shows us the difference between the emotion and the justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that begins at home and usually stays there.
Tzedakah?
I feel more like it's charity. And the reason I think it is because tzedakah, I think, speaks to a greater structure, justice within the community or within the country or the world. And this is debate. I mean, you guys could disagree with me and I wouldn't be like completely, firm about it. But to me, it seems more like charity because it's more of an emotional thing.
But you would get, my understanding is, begins at home and stays there. It's like, how do you give charity at home? I don't.
Oh, you feel sorry for someone, so you give in to something they want. Or you're one of those parents who's scared of your kid, so they ask for a new iPhone and you just.
Okay.
Maybe it's that I'm thinking.
I wasn't thinking about that. Okay.
And even as we were saying, when charity becomes enabling of a destructive lifestyle, it could be more of that kind of thing. But that's what I was thinking. Along with gratitude, it is a word that should be wiped from our vocabulary because in real life, help is given out of friendship or it is not valued. It is received from the hand of friendship or it is resented. Robert Louis Stevenson said that. So I think that could be charity or tzedakah, and I actually think that it's a statement I disagree with, because if you know about giving tzedakah, which I'm sure you do, you need to give it so that the person preserves their dignity. So to me, that wouldn't apply. Again, jump in if you have anything that you want to say. The next one is as a sign of righteous man, such that we must be more scrupulous in fulfilling the commandment than any other positive commandment. Anyone? Tzedakah, charity?
Tzedakah?
I think tzedakah also. Okay. Is chief among religious commands that have a near instant effect. I think it could be both, because although in the Jewish religion, I feel like it's tzedakah, but it could be chesed. So I'm going to go with both. And if you disagree with me, just chime in. Is this fundamentally wrong as, did I skip one? Yeah. Is this fundamentally wrong as a cure for poverty, as capital punishment is a cure for crime? I really like that Henry Ford quote.
Charity?
I think charity.
Yeah. Because charity is just like you give your money and just, it doesn't really help. It doesn't continue necessarily into what maybe tzedakah would, creating justice.
Right, exactly. It's more of an emotional, more of a Band-Aid.
Yeah, Band-Aid, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's such that it looks at the need and not at the cause.
Charity.
I think charity also. It's an interesting thing to do. And some other conversation things you might want to speak with your students about. Have you ever given money to a homeless person on the street? If so, why? And how did you feel? And if not, why? And how did you feel? It's an interesting conversation. I don't give money, but my son-in-law gives, this is great. He bought a bunch of Subway gift cards. So if someone asks for money on the street, he can give them this card. They can go into Subway and get a sandwich and a drink with dignity. I think that's kind of interesting.
Nice.
Have you ever given more than you could actually afford to give? Do you imagine yourself to be the kind of person who could give your last dollar to someone who needs to bus home, even if it were to mean that you yourself would have to walk home? Have you ever done something like that? And is such an act charity or tzedakah? So We don't have to answer all these questions now, but they are things to think about when we're, having our students look at this. And of course, if you want to answer, go ahead. They say that a gift given once is given twice. If you give it at once, it's considered giving it twice. Why is that? Because it's important not just what you give, but how you give. So if you give something quickly, then it's considered more meaningful than if you give it, with a, I found my mind, he says it with a sunken face. And the question is, can you think of any examples of a gift that you've received that was given poorly, or a gift that was given to you with particular grace? That's something to think about. And the last question, it is sometimes said that tzedakah breeds dependency. This may very well be true, but it also seems like a pretty convenient way to justify one's own greed. So what do you think? How should the giver of tzedakah take into consideration the negative consequences which might arise out of the charitable act? And I think these are all really important things to think about when we start our conversation. So I'm going through the booklet, and the next thing that you'll see in the booklet is always called the report. And it's Matt Barr, it's a video where he will take the topic and he'll talk about it a little bit. So I'm going to show you the report. I'm not used to clicking on a link while doing Zoom, so bear with me if it doesn't work the way I think it's going to work, but hopefully it will. Okay. And can you see, what do you see on the screen right now?
Just there's the slide that says report, and that's it. Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'm going to share this instead. This is what you'll see when you click on that link when you're doing this in class. Do you now see a page from the Chai Mitzvah website?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
You go to November, because it's November's topic, and you'll just click on it, and that's how you'll get the report.
I'm Matt Barr, and this is the Bible Raps Report. The first question asked to God in the Torah is, "Am I my brother's keeper?" If you were the first human and poof, you appeared, and you had one question to ask God, what would that question be? Some might ask, why me? Or what's the purpose of this? Or are we all one? Or perhaps some. How to know which problem is really worth solving, and are we all in? Put your fingers in the light until the light revolves them up. Sorry about that. Got a little carried away. But as I was saying, the first question asked to God in the Torah, at least, is, am I my brother's keeper? Which in Hebrew is, because am I my brother's keeper is the first question asked in Judaism. We, as the Jewish people, have been affirming different answers of, yes, we are our brothers and sisters' keeper for a hot minute. We've developed concepts like tikkun olam, which means and lashon hara, which means evil speech, or as a 21st century sage put it, when I speak lashon hara, I know what really hurts you. Nothing but in Indeed, the prophet Isaiah speaks of an age of peace and kindness, where the Jews are a light among nations, until everybody's like, shouting tikkun olam, combating lashon hara, and being a light among nations are a few of the values Judaism has emphasized to help us be our brothers and sisters. Incredibly, in the Beit Midrash, there are 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge concerning how to be your brothers and sisters' keeper. It's not easy. Take, for example, the 12th century sage and Torah superhero, Rambam. And we come find our gates so valuable, Torah superheroes, our powers unmeasurable, Rashi, even as a Rambam. He takes what's already a mitzvah, giving tzedakah, and says there are 8 ways to give tzedakah. From an ethical standpoint, some are higher than others. He gets deep with it. And how do we get to something deep? That's right, Little Wayne. You dig. Lastly, I'd like to thank the official sponsor of the Bible Raps Report, Hashem. High five! I'm Matt Barr, and that was the Bible Raps Report.
Okay, so that is That's what the Bible Raps report looks like. And so you can see he said that there were three things. There's tikkun olam, there's combating lashon hara, and there's being a light among nations. So there are a few different things you can do with this. You probably want to talk about how your students define each of these concepts. What about each one speaks to the students? Like, which do they find most compelling? And what's the way that the students can act on this concept? Like, what can they do in terms of tikkun olam? So you could either discuss it all as a class, you could break into 3 groups and have each one discuss one and then come back together. You can vote on which is most important to the majority of the class, but in some way you can take these different concepts and you can talk about them in the light of charity versus tzedakah. Any comments? Anything?
That's the first time I've seen that in his report. So that's every unit has that? Has something like that?
Just about everyone. Every unit has either a report or a beat midrash, which we'll get to later also, and different things from Matt and his other rapping rebbes. Yeah, to bring it to life. And again, you know, it's flexible, so use what works for you. If you don't, you know what I mean?
I know I don't know. I mean, some kids might think this kind of hokey, you know.
If you think it's hokey, don't show.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not able to use your whole curriculum. You know, I'm just kind of extracting because of my situation. But
right. So
I was just thinking, should I use that?
You know, with my other curriculum, with I have one where I have Nefesh Mountain singing Hine Matov, and to me that was a little bit mighty windish. So you use what you think your kids are going to.
Yeah.
Mighty wind. That's funny. So can you connect for me these 3 topics in this report to the bigger topic of the unit? Because I'm not seeing the connection, and I'm kind of wondering how that fits into things.
That is great. Okay, so it kind of, I think, goes by how you would define each concept. So let's think about it. So especially Lashon Hara. Let me go back so I can just look at what they are. Okay, so Tikkun Olam is easy because tzedakah, charity, Tikkun Olam, those are things you do to improve the world, where you give of yourself to improve. Being a light among nations also is like we're leaders in, for example, when there was a tsunami, because the Israelis are so used to dealing with emergencies, they went and helped. Okay, so that kind of thing, a light among nations, that I think is easy to connect. If what I'm saying isn't showing you the connection, just tell me. But I think that connects easily. Combating Lashon Hara is a little more of a reach, I think. But I think it's very valid because it's very much a part of, I think, most teenagers' experiences. And I think that it has to do with being a good person who tries to be charitable and just in their relationships with other people. So you know the way you're supposed to be, you know what the respectful towards other people ways is, and that's what you should try to do. You shouldn't be doing Lashon Hara. You should be respectful, charitable, and just in your dealings with other people.
Has anybody seen that Lady Gaga recent video?
Yeah.
Being good. I had thought about showing that to my kids because I thought they could, Lady Gaga, they're gonna really relate to that.
It was funny. I did not like her until very recently.
Yeah, same as me. I mean, she's got substance. She does have substance.
Yeah. What was the video?
It's Lady Gaga. It's going around the internet. It's a Lady Gaga. It's a video where she just kind of goes on and tells people to be kind to each other and nice. And coming from someone like her, people might actually listen to it. I know it was very good, and it had a lot of views.
Thank you into my follow-up email, because I used to just see her dressed in meat and think she was like just going out there like more focused on herself than on her actual.
Yeah, and she has a lot of power. She's a major celebrity, and so it's nice to see somebody.
I feel like after I think I saw an interview with her somewhere, and I just saw A Star Is Born, and I just
Oh, I heard that was great.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really good. I feel like there was more substance to her, so we'll find what that link is, and I'll send it out.
Yeah, I just for some reason it just connected in because I've been thinking how to fit that in to something, and now I sort of understand how I could do that. Okay.
I mean, and that's the thing about this topic too. It can bring up a lot of things about how people relate to each other in terms of helping those who are in need financially or food and stuff, but also in how people relate to each other just in terms of dignity and respect of other people. And that's a big topic in this also. So I'm going to go to the next one. It's pretty short from Deuteronomy. You shall set aside every year a 10th part of all the yield of your sowing that is brought from the field. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Torah says you should give 10% of your earnings to tzedakah. So, do your students agree? Because that's not something we do. We give something, but how much do you think is appropriate? How do you think a society like America or Israel would be different if everyone gave 10% of the income to charity? I know there are some, I don't want to say cults, there are some religious orders that do that. I think maybe the Mormons. It's just interesting to see. I mean, the Jewish people are known as people who take care of our own and even of others. But the 10% thing is not something we necessarily do. So that would be an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I've seen some observant families actually plan out, based on how they end out at the end of the year. They plan out their 10% and they allocate it and they discuss it as a family. So yeah, it's not maybe universally done, or imposed, because who would impose it? But I think there are parts of our community that do that, and I think it's worth bringing up because that can be an interesting model. And maybe if it's not 10%, being thoughtful about how to do it, and not just throwing money at problems. I think that's really an interesting topic to discuss.
I think so too. I think that's
I'm not looking at the packet right now, but does it also bring up Kol Nadav Libo?
Not
of terumah, of giving the gifts for the Beit HaMikdash?
No, well, yes. I don't think this one does. I think a different one does.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember where I just saw that. If it was it's somewhere. I'm not sure if it's in this packet or if it's in one of the other packets.
Okay. Because it uses the root, so I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, that could be a good connection.
Yeah, it's definitely in one of the packets, but I can't remember if it's in this one. But that doesn't mean we can't bring it up anyway,
Right.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's in the Musar. I'm pretty sure it's in the Musar one, not the straight Musar, not the Matt Bar Musar. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's kind of nice to think about planning. I mean, I know a lot of people plan to give away because they have to because of tax reasons and stuff. But the idea of planning so that when something comes along, that you're not like when you go to the grocery store, they say, oh, would you like to give $1 for this, $1 for that, this, that, and people are always attacking. And the idea of actually planning, okay, I'm going to give $200, or something this year or whatever, and I can give it to this and this and plan it out. For kids to maybe think about that, I think is a really cool idea, because I don't like people attacking me and asking, for something that I'm not even, ready to do.
I think if you feel good about your giving, if you have a plan or if you know what you're doing, then that won't bother you, because you'll say, well, I'm not giving $1, but I'm giving $10 over there. So I think that's important. And I think it's great to think about planning it and think about what percentage it is. I like what you said, Adam, about the families wait till the end of the year, then they see where they are. They might give away something within the year, but they see where they are and they decide what to do. I think that's a really interesting concept that I don't know if a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and I think also having the discussion about planning brings up the idea of like what are the values that you embrace? What are the things that you want to address?
Mhm.
That gets really to this piece of tzedakah versus charity. Like if there are issues that bother you that you want to see addressed in the world, in your vision of the world, then that's tzedek, and then you can address them head on. Everything else is charity. The handouts, the ask at the grocery store, would you like to buy a paper apple to put on the wall? I mean, all those things are nice, but are they really addressing a problem, and are they addressing even the things that you see as being problems in the world?
Yeah.
So
That's a really good
it's
point.
always a balancing act, but
Yes.
I think it's an opportunity to talk about, like, what's the vision that you want of the world?
Right. And that's what tzedakah is about. So that's getting right to the heart of it, which is important. So I'm going to skip to the next text from Rambam, which is interesting because now first we've talked about how much, and now we're going to talk about how. Okay, so gives to the poor. When a poor person whose identity is unknown says, "I am hungry, provide me with food," we do not investigate whether he's a deceiver. Instead, we provide him with sustenance immediately. The next one, it's prohibited to turn the poor person away empty-handed. Even if you give him a single date, as it says, do not turn the downtrodden away humiliated. Also from Hilchot Matanot L'Nevim, it is preferable for one to increase the amount of gifts to the poor than to increase the amount spent on one's own meal or on the portions that are sent to friends. And the last one, there's no greater or splendid joy than to bring happiness to the hearts of the poor and the orphans and the widow and the strangers. For one who brings joy to those unfortunates is like the divine presence. As it is written, to revive the spirit of the law and to revive the hearts of the oppressed. So we're talking about a couple of things. We're talking about the habit of giving. So they say if a person gives 1,000 coins at one time to one person, it's not as good as one who gives 1,000 times with 1,000 coins. For in the latter case, you're multiplying the spirit of generosity 1,000 times over, while giving just once will not awaken the spirit. It'll awaken the spirit of generosity once, and then it ends. Okay? So why does Rambam say that it's better to give often rather than to give the same amount once? And it's pretty obvious. It's because it's creating a habit of giving. If you're used to giving, it becomes a habit. So that's what that's about. And what does Rambam say about the dignity of the poor? So a good question. What do you think it feels like to say to someone, "I'm hungry, can you give me food?" So that's why you don't ask a person if they're hungry. You just give them food. You're taking away their dignity if you need them. If you say, like, "Well, when's the last time you ate?
Mhm.
What did you have? Maybe you don't need this food." It's hard. What would it feel like for this person to receive the food, even if it's just a small snack? If they're really hungry, it depends, I think, how they receive it. If you just share it with them, great. But if you kind of give it grudgingly, it's a whole different feeling. And it's interesting. So before we answer the rest of the questions that come with this, a folk saying says that a fool gives and a wise person takes. This is about a person who gives tzedakah. A fool who gives tzedakah thinks he or she is giving, while a wise person who gives realizes that he or she is taking. He or she is the one who benefits most by the action. How do you benefit from giving tzedakah? What do you think? I think it just feels really good when you see someone be happy because you helped them, which is kind of might talk to our definition of charity. But the question is, when has your own act of giving to another really been a gift to yourself, when you've received more than you've given? That's one of those things. I remember one of my daughters was tutoring a kid when she was in high school, and I never forgot this, her college essay, she wrote that the grade she's most proud of is an A on a third grade spelling test because she helped this little girl study. And to her, that was like a big gift, a big accomplishment. She gave of her time. And when she got back was like this great feeling. I think that might be what it's talking about using what you have to help others and how that feels. Rambam says that bringing joy to people in an unfortunate situation is like the divine presence. So what does he mean? And do you agree with this? So first we have to figure out what he means and then to figure out whether we agree with it. It's hard to identify with the divine presence because none of us really understand that. But I think we feel that God is generous and that we are being able to give the way God gives. Anybody jump in if you've got another idea? It'll be interesting to see what your students think, because that's an unending question. I mean, it's a question with no right or wrong answer. So after this happens, keep in touch. Let me know what your students have to say about it. I'd be interested. Okay, so this brings us to the Beit Midrash. So as you know, the Beit Midrash is like looking at text and then commenting and discussing it. What the Beit Midrash is, it is the same thing. It's one of the rapping rabbis. It's either Matt or two other guys that you'll see later on. They take something, a concept, they do a rap about it, and then they comment on the rap and what it means. I think this is a really interesting one, so I'm going to play it for you, and then we can talk about it. It talks about tzedakah in modern times when everyone's connected and people get desensitized. They feel like they can't do anything or they're paralyzed because there's so many options available. So let's listen to this, and then we'll discuss the questions that you see here about relating to it. I'm going to do my share thing again. Hold on. Okay, there we go.
I go by the Bible Rapper, and this is the Beit Midrash, and I will be dropping Debar Torahs on that Milsar mixtape. My brothers keeper. My brothers keep it. My brothers keep it. I'm all about my people. 8 a.m. I wake up and then go back to sleep. I ain't waking till 10. I make a bagel with the cream cheese, working at 3 until then I'm trying to take it easy. Turn on the TV, loads of shows, they just go so slow with those highs and lows. No, I ain't feeling that. Turn on the news and the news is revealing that. Single mom going crazy, working 2 jobs, can't provide for her baby. People in her core like, who's gonna save me and slave me? Members of the government again acting shady. Man on the streets, next meal is a maybe. It doesn't even faze me. Not that I'm lazy, my coffee is warm and my bagel is tasty. So why would it faze me, let alone change me? What that praise be? Am I my brothers keep it. Am I? Yeah. Just showing you different ways of doing hype man, hype woman stuff. If you're not into rapping, you can always go right time, and it will make everything sound better. Watching different news shows. Turn on the news and the news is revealing that. Single mom going crazy, working 2 jobs, can't provide for her baby. People in our fore like, who's gonna save me and slave me? Members of the government again acting shady. Man on the streets, next meal is a maybe. There's all these different problems coming at me at 1,000 miles per hour, and there's so many problems that we can, in a limited way, affect because we're all so connected now. And sometimes that makes you desensitized a little bit because all these problems exist and are heartbreaking and are tragic, but they're not heartbreaking. Not enough that they get me off the couch and going and try to solve one a little bit. Why I love learning Judaism is because there's these eternal questions and each generation answers them a little differently or a lot differently or similarly. But I think Am I my brother's keeper, when you ask it for someone living now, you know about problems happening in your neighboring state just as much as you are connected in certain ways to problems happening in Australia. So what are the values that go into why you give the limited resources you have to a certain cause?
Okay, so that is the Beat Midrash. So you can see that he has these ideas. I mean, it's an interesting way of doing it. If you don't like the rap, which I kind of like, but the words are in the packet as well, if you want to do the words and not his video. So the question to look at after you hear this, do you relate to what he says? Do you find that you're overwhelmed by all these problems? And has an image on TV ever actually moved you to give? Or has a news report? What does move someone to give? What is their inspiration to give? That's a good question. So sometimes we talk about tzedakah and we know that people give because it's good for their ego. They want to see their name on the wall. They want to see their name as a donor. That's not the highest form of tzedakah, clearly, but it's important to know that it's better to give than not to give, but maybe that's not the best reason to give. So that's something to talk about here.
Another thing, if I just might mention, I know there's a lot of kids like the idea of giving to, Humane Society or any animal organization. And, I remember last year I had to kind of tell kids, some of these organizations really aren't really kosher, and there's a lot of people out there masquerading as nonprofits or organizations, and and they're asking for money, and they're really top heavy, like paying their executives a lot of money. So how do you answer, if the kid wants to give money to that or this, how do you answer that,
It's an easy question to answer, actually. I used to work for JNF. There is like a charity, a place where you can look up every charity and see.
Yeah, I know that, yeah, to see if it's legit, but,
So just look at the ones that don't give. You can't even be a legal charity if you give more than like 17% of your earnings to your operation.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know if it was just somebody's opinion that they really aren't, using all the monies. I mean, I don't want to get in the way of, somebody else's, what they want, that they want to give to a certain organization, but giving them the knowledge that, they're not really using the money that would, instead of just saying, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, no, I think that it's a really good thing to bring up, even because you're actually getting down to the basics. You're saying what's a specific issue you see and how do you choose it? Well, one of the things you can talk about is how do you see if a charity is legit? Not only, and maybe you're not just giving your money, maybe you're giving your time. There are a lot of different ways you can give. And I think just starting to think of what you can do is pretty important. And I think probably you can tell me if this is true of where you are, but most synagogues and schools have things that they're doing that are helping the community.
Yeah.
You're having food drives, or you're giving clothing, or you're going to
do all kinds of things. Sure, of course.
And this is a good place to get involved, to think about even maybe the students have something in their minds that's inspirational for them that's not already going on. There's a link to a website in the very end of this webinar and in the end of the materials that gives some like 12 things you can do, different areas that might inspire students also, about things they might want to do or give. So that's interesting. Let's talk about, and this is interesting too, because we're back to the dignity. I think it's one of the things I think that's the difference between charity and tzedakah also is charities from your heart. You might give with so the person retains their dignity, or you might not. But if you're doing tzedakah, I think because it's a more just, more prescribed thing, it might be maybe less dignity robbing. I'm not sure, but this is interesting. There are 8 names for a poor person. And if you look at these 8 names, by what you hear them, you can kind of see how people were looked at and what how they were looked at and what it meant. So here, There are 8 names for a poor person. Ani, it's hard for me to see this. Evyon, Misken, Rash, Dal, Dach, Mach, Helech. Okay? Let's look at the definition of each one. By the way, am I still sharing this? Can you still see this or no?
No.
And then I've got to share it with you again. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here we go. Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so an ani is an afflicted or poor. Evyon is one who longs because he longs for everything. A misken, which I always think of my mother talking about someone and calling them that, despised, because he's despised by all. As it says, the poor man's wisdom is despised. Rash, impoverished, because he is dispossessed of property. Dal, detached, because he is detached from property. Dach, oppressed, because he is crushed. He sees a thing but cannot eat it. He sees a thing and cannot taste it. He cannot drink it. Mach, trampled upon, because he is lowly before everyone, like a kind of lowish threshold. And halach, a vagrant, or halash, weak. So there's some interesting ways to look at how a poor person may be seen. And certainly we would want to think about how people were looked at when this was written, and how charity can be given with dignity or without dignity, and how that compares to tzedakah. Does anybody want to say anything? All right. Well, I think we kind of get the answer here. I mean, we know that we need to think about the dignity of the person that we're helping, because it's more helpful to let them preserve their dignity. Okay, so now you see on the screen, you see Ephraim time. This is a rapping Rebbe. So students will, I was telling you about, you can IG the rapping Rebbe and you get an answer back. So there were 3 of them. There's Matt Barr, who you're familiar with. There's this guy named Papa Left. Papa Left is this 26-year-old rapper from West Orange. He's a little tougher in his demeanor than Matt. His father was a rabbi, and he's descended from a long line of famous Polish rabbis. His T-shirt he wears, it says Abba Azav. So Papa Left doesn't mean left hand. It meant his dad left. His father passed away when he was 15, and he found comfort in rap. Then this guy, Ephraim, who you see his picture here, he works in education in public schools. And so he's an educator. So they're both rappers and educators. So if your students IG them, they will get a good answer back. I kind of monitor it as well. So, but that's an interesting thing for them to be able to do. Okay, Chesed, Tzedek, and Tzedakah. So there's a link to a video. This is Rabbi Ruttenberg, and she talks about the practice of loving kindness, of chesed, caring for someone else. It's voluntary and individual, which is very much like how we are defining charity during this. That means we choose to give something over to someone else out of personal connection. So without taking time to watch this video during this webinar, because we don't have that much time, we can look at the questions Rabbi Ruttenberg raises, and in some respect she'll answer them in this video. She talks about chesed being the practice of loving kindness. So we can talk about what's the difference between chesed and tzedakah. Tzedek, or justice, is a Jewish practice that's focused on changing the systems in place in our society. So there will be greater equality and resources for those who need it. So we can talk about some things that we haven't brought up yet, like racism, sexism, homophobia. How do these contribute to someone falling into poverty or being in need of some kind of help? Maybe not poverty, maybe another kind of help they'll need. And after watching this video, there's a nice class activity. You split up into groups, choose a problem in the world that you want to fix, like hunger, global warming, poverty, Jewish education, general education, domestic abuse. I'm sure that your students have lots of issues that they're thinking about. And each group will choose a problem and create a commercial with visuals on paper, while a narrator compels the class to give towards an organization that helps solve the problem. At the end, have a class vote about where to give. It's a good way to focus on different problems and on ways that they could think of to solve them. Matt suggests watching Sarah McLachlan, the commercial for the animals, for inspiration.
But you know what? That's one of the organizations I think that's really top heavy.
Is it? We should check it out.
I think it is.
You know what? Before I send out, I'm going to make myself a note. In the follow-up email, I will check out that.
Yeah, I mean, don't quote me on that, but I think it might be, and that's the one that I think it's. Unless it's is there another one where there's a famous person that also does the?
You know what? A lot of them have famous people.
There's one of them I know that is not like they pay the person. They pay people a lot of money. But maybe it's not that one. But I know there's one of them that's on TV all the time.
It's very easy to check it out. You know what I'm also going to send? I'm going to send, I forget the name of the website where you check them out. It's charity something. I'm going to
I know I've been on it before, but
I'm going to send a link to that too, because that way you can use it if you want to. And certainly if we have a link to somebody who is not a good charity, we should take it.
I just want to make sure that that's not the one that I've heard about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll check that out before I send
it.
Giving dignity. Okay, so again, it's how to give gifts to the poor. And this is a source from the Mishnah Torah. One who gives charity to a poor person with bad grace and his face to the ground, or with a bad attitude, even if he gave 1,000 gold pieces, he has destroyed his merit and lost it. Rather, we must give with a cheerful expression and gladly, and commiserate with him about his troubles. As it says, if I have not wept for him that was in trouble, and if my soul grieve not for the needy, and speak gracious and comforting words to him, as it says, I cause the widow's heart to sing for joy. So this kind of reiterates one of the things we talked about before, but the basic question is, how do you give with dignity? And by now, I would think that the students would know that you give respect to the person that you are giving to. Of course, if you do the, Rambam's ladder of Tzedakah, you know that the best way to give is anonymously. But just, knowing this, it's a good text to help you think about that situation. And this other one, Mishpat versus Tzedek, is similar. Before I read this, I want to tell you that if you've looked in your packets, you will see that it doesn't say Mishpat. It says some English word that autocorrect made. Anyway, I will be sending new ones. When I saw it, I was like, oh, it's mishap, maybe? It's very funny. Whatever it is that it says, instead of what it's supposed to say, you will get a new PDF. Because when I saw that, I thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, let's read it. The Untranslatable Virtue by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He says, but mishpat, justice, alone cannot create a good society. We kind of touched upon this before. It must be added tzedakah, distributive justice. One can imagine a society which fastidiously observes the rule of law, and it contains so much inequality that wealth is concentrated into the hands of the few, and many are left without the most basic requirements of a dignified existence. There may be high unemployment and widespread poverty. Some may live in palaces while others go homeless. That's not the kind of order that Torah contemplates. There must be justice not only in how the law is applied, but also in how the means of existence, wealth as God's blessing, are distributed. That's tzedakah. So that's a definition of tzedakah that we may have not touched upon quite the same way before. So you can ask, what's the difference between mishpat and tzedakah? And what's the kind of order that you think the Torah contemplates? If you were looking at different societies, which do you think are the most just? Why? And how would you change them? Or how would you change the one you live in to make it more just? Okay, so the next thing is creative time. So this will come at the end of every lesson. And again, looking at all the things we covered, you may or may not have time to cover all of them. You may pick the ones, because there are a few themes, and you don't actually need every single text to cover all of them. Do what works for your class and what works for you. But have the kids go back and choose one of the texts they studied. Then choose an activity from the suggestions below. Write your reply in rap form, with or without a partner or two. Illustrate 3 to 5 words that are most important to you. Ad-lib the text while you show the word. Meditate on the text. Share your thoughts out loud or in a journal. So if you're a little not sure how to rap, there is a video which is linked to the beginning of every one of the PDFs, which is Matt kind of showing how to rap. I don't think you need to be any specific kind of person to do that. I saw like white-haired ladies in kipahs doing it at Cage. So, you know, I think probably you wouldn't be teaching this if you didn't think you could do it. But anyway, that's helpful for the kids and for you. And save the work that's done during this time, because in the end of the year, you're going to have a project where you're going to send all your saved material to Matt, and he's going to edit it into a rap video for you. Also, I'd encourage students to try different creative activities each time, either working with friends or independently, because it's good to, you know, round things out. But if like one kid just loves to draw, and that kid wants to draw at the end of every lesson, that's good too. It's, you know, either one is okay. Now, there is some interesting additional information that there are links to. There's the Bible Raps Nation Billionaires. This is a video done by teens at Camp Ramah, and it's cute. And if your students are similar to these students, they'll get a kick out of it. It's really cute. It's about being a billionaire and what you would do with your money, and tzedakah, and it's good. The next link is Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who's the chief rabbi of England. And this is a link to his website with various writings about tzedakah. These are at the other end of the spectrum from what I just described to you with billionaire. These are pretty heavy. You might want them for background information, or you might direct your students to them if you think they're serious students. There's a great Eli talk about reigniting the soul of philanthropy. This woman, Yael Simon, explores the elements of giving. And she's talking about balancing these elements with the responsibility of giving, and that's what makes philanthropy a meaningful experience. That might be more background for us as well. Then this next one is amazing. It's a scene from Schindler's List. Could you do more? How many of you saw Schindler's List?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you remember at the end when he gets a coin and it talks about, it's like to honor him, and he says, I could have done more, I could have done more. Not a coin, a ring.
I remember when he said that.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's just saying, I could have done more, and he's like breaking down. So it'd be a very interesting discussion. This man saved like 1,100 people, and they're going to multiply in generations and generations. And how does that compare? He, instead of being proud of himself, he's saying, I could have done more. I could have saved one more person, you know? So it's a very emotional and meaningful scene, and I think it can really prompt an interesting discussion with your students.
With my, because I'm teaching 6th grade now, as among other groups, and part of our curriculum is the Holocaust, and, you know, instead of, you know, going over gory details of Holocaust, you know, we try to extract things that, you know, we can learn from the Holocaust, and I talk a lot about, like, you know, righteous Gentiles and partisans, and, you know, the people who gave their life, who helped. But this is a great example, you know, to show that, because I don't even know if my students have seen Schindler's List yet. They're, you know, only 6th graders. So the thing is so frustrating, though, that I've been thinking about the whole time, you know, we've been all together, is that, you know, they said there's like 13 million people in Yemen or something that are like on the verge of starving to death, and those numbers are so big, they're bigger than how many Jews perished in the Holocaust. And it's so frustrating, because it's like, what do you do? I mean, what do you do? Like is it better to just help one person, you know, or a group? I mean, I'm sure I'm going to get these kind of questions from kids, like in terms of Holocaust and such, and I'm not exactly sure. You know, I know there's ethical answers to these questions, which we're doing a lot of stuff with Jewish ethics, but I can tie it all in. But it is very frustrating when you hear about this, like, you know, genocides and millions of people starving to death and thousands of people here, thousands of people there, and the tendency is just like, oh my God, I don't think I can do anything.
So there's two things this brings up in my mind. Anyone else jump in if you have ideas. But the first one is, it kind of reminds me of the beat midrash we just saw, right? You just get desensitized because it's a problem. But the other thing is, that saying, it's better, you don't have to finish the job, you just have to start it.
Okay.
So, anything they do is good.
Right.
Just, Schindler was upset because he didn't help everyone, but he helped 1,100 people.
Right.
If he helped 4 people who were starving, that's still 4 people who got food.
Yeah.
So you don't have to finish the job. You just have to start it.
No, that's a very good thing to say, because it could be so daunting, when you hear about the whole problem. But this Schindler's List excerpt would probably be a good one, to show kids, at least he helped this, he started it. Yes, he could. How could he have done more? He did so much,
I wasted so much money that I could have used. But the thing is, you do what you can do.
Right.
And at the time. And you don't have to finish the job. You just have
Isn't there something like in Jewish ethics values, like if you help one person or you save one person, I don't know what.
Saving the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of great things like that, yes. And that's something to quote to them too.
Yeah.
Saving a life is the equivalent of saving an entire universe.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yes. Well done. Thank you.
And that could bring it down, to a smaller scale, so that, it wouldn't be so, I mean, I get overwhelmed. It's like, I want to help all these people all over the world. Like, what can I do,
That's what that beat midrash was about. That's exactly.
Yeah, right, right.
We wouldn't have known about Yemen if we were in the United States long ago.
Right.
So it's something that it's hard. It's part of our current, our global society. So it's important to help other people.
I know that the kids, we're learning about how the United States knew about what was going on, but they didn't help. And the kids they're wrestling with that. They're like, why? They're asking lots of questions, and I'm trying to get them to go and do research and find out, like, what. I said, well, the president was sort of an anti-Semite, just starts things like that. But
so one of the things that I think really comes into play when we talk about this, I used to do educational materials for kids when Milton did kids materials, like back in the 80s when we were all and I used to work with Eddie Rauch, who has passed away, but he was an amazing guy. And one thing he said that I never forgot, he said, things that seem normal to us now may seem barbaric in 100 years.
Wow.
I think that's one of the things that plays. I don't think in today's society, a 10-year-old can understand what it was like during World War II, how people felt, what they thought was just in certain ways.
Right.
I think a lot of what we feel is just today grew out of what happened then. The world evolves and people learn from what's happened before. Hopefully they learn. So
I don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we're doing as Jewish educators. We're trying to help the world.
Right.
So what I would say to the kids is, in those days, being an anti-Semite wasn't really considered so bad. I mean, anti-Semitism still exists, and it's always been bad, obviously, to us as Jews. But there's a lot of prejudice in the world, and that's.
Well, also people, they lived with their own groups. They weren't so homogenized. Like I was telling the kids, the Jews, they lived in their little villages, their own villages, or maybe there weren't that many in each village, but they just kind of kept to themselves, and it was like a whole different world. They weren't interacting with the other people.
That's absolutely right. And so and moving along, the next link is really light. So I think we're having a great discussion, and I would highly recommend the Schindler's List as an additional information. The next one's called Shaboom, Get with the Giving. It explains what tzedakah is and how to give, but and certain kids will love it. I mean, my daughter, when she was a teenager, loved to watch The Fairly Odd Parents. I don't know, maybe just felt light to her, but this cartoon is along the lines of The Fairly Odd Parents, and it's about tzedakah. So that's that. And then the last thing I want to tell you about is there's 12 ways to volunteer your time and give back to the community. It's a very nice website that gives some suggestions that might inspire your kids to come up with a project of their own. So that is what I wanted to tell you today. I'm you're also trying to keep it to the time because I know everybody's super busy except me, because this is what I do. But I you know, I'm really glad that you joined me. And if you have any questions or any comments about any of the things we talked about, I would love to hear them now.
Just a lot to think about. Good information.
There's a lot to think about. I think there's a lot of groups.
Yes.
Also, I really would love to hear how this goes with your classes. I want to encourage you really strongly to post on Facebook if you have photos or if you have something you want to say or share. Definitely encourage your kids to Instagram the Rapping Rebbe's, because, you know, we'd love to do that. We're trying to post more stuff on our Instagram page now, so we want to do that. We also have, so we have the hashtag Chai Mitzvah Mitzvah. If you do something interesting and you want to post it on Instagram, add hashtag Chai Mitzvah Mitzvah. And you'll see that there's a few schools who show their kids doing like interesting stuff at that hashtag. And I'm going to send a follow-up email with all the things we talked about, which is exciting. And I want to thank you guys for joining me.
Okay, I just happened to find a website. It says America's Worst Charities, and some of the worst ones are those Kids Wish networks.
Oh yeah, I know, the 1-800.
Oh my God! And breast cancer and cancer. There's so many cancer ones.
You can use the website Charity Navigator to help sift through the ones that are good and bad. They'll rank them.
Yes.
I think GuideStar does the same thing. But Nina, thank you for walking us through everything. This is very helpful, and look forward to trying to implement some of these lesson plans.
Thanks so much. And actually, Charity Navigator was the one I couldn't think of because.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for joining, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.